Last night I woke up to a faint murmur in the darkness, a whisper that sliced through my sleep like a blade through silk. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then the voice became clearer, lower, deliberate. It was Daniel, my husband. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone pressed close to his lips. "Mom, the pin is 2397. Withdraw everything before morning. She's asleep. There's more than $1 million on that card." My blood ran cold, but my body stayed still. I didn't move, didn't even breathe too loud. I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining it. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. He paused, waiting for her response, then whispered again, "Yes, take it all. I'll explain later." The words crawled into my chest like poison. The man I shared my life with was calmly plotting to rob me in the middle of the night, with his own mother. I could almost hear her laughter through the speaker, greedy, impatient. But instead of crying or shouting, I smiled slightly in the dark. Because 2 days ago, something inside me had warned me that this moment was coming. I had seen his eyes avoid mine, the sudden affection, the forced kindness. I had smelled guilt in his touch. So I acted quietly. I replaced the card linked to my main account with a decoy. The account he thought had more than $1 million was now nothing but a trap. A test. And he had failed it exactly as I expected. I lay there listening to every word, memorizing his tone, his betrayal. "She won't notice anything until morning," he whispered. My heart wanted to break, but my mind was steady. I had loved him once, deeply, but what slept beside me now was a stranger wearing my husband's face. After a few minutes, he hung up the phone and slid back into bed. His breathing slowed as if nothing had happened. I watched his silhouette against the dim light of the window, wondering how someone could look so peaceful after betraying the person who trusted him the most. I turned on my side, facing away, my smile cold and steady. I whispered to myself, "Let's see how far you go, Daniel." My eyes stayed open for a long time. I wasn't angry anymore. I was curious. How would a man like him react when his perfect little plan collapsed? Would he beg, blame, or run? I had already alerted the bank about potential fraud activity on my account. They told me any suspicious attempt would trigger immediate investigation. And now the stage was set. He had just handed them his confession. I could have stopped him right then, told him I knew everything, but I didn't. I wanted him to walk right into the trap he built for himself. The silence of the room wrapped around me, heavy and waiting. The clock ticked softly, marking every second toward his downfall. I remembered the vows he made to me, the promises, the love that used to feel real. But love without loyalty is a weapon, not warmth. I realized I wasn't crying. I wasn't even trembling. I had already mourned this marriage long before that night. I closed my eyes, the faint trace of a smile still on my lips, and let the quiet swallow me. 40 minutes passed slowly. I heard nothing but the rhythmic breathing beside me. And then, without warning, his phone buzzed violently on the nightstand. Once, twice, then continuously, like an alarm from hell. Daniel groaned, half asleep, irritated. "Who's calling at this hour?" he muttered, grabbing the phone lazily. He blinked at the screen, confusion turning to shock. His body tensed, and he sat up suddenly. The blue light from the screen painted his face pale. I could see his reflection in the mirror across the room, eyes wide, mouth open, frozen. I didn't need to see the message to know what it said. His mother must have tried the ATM. I heard his breath hitch, a tiny gasp of panic. What the hell?" he whispered. The phone slipped from his hand and landed on the floor. He picked it up again with shaking fingers. "Son, she knew everything. She set us up. They're here." That was the message that shattered him. He looked around as if the walls were closing in. His chest rose and fell quickly, fear crawling over him. I stayed silent, still pretending to be asleep, my heart calm. The plan had worked perfectly. Everything he'd built on deceit was collapsing before he could even understand what had gone wrong. I waited a few seconds before turning slowly, pretending to wake up. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked softly, my voice calm, almost sweet. He stared at me like he had seen a ghost. Nothing's wrong," he stammered, hiding the phone under the blanket. But his trembling hands betrayed him. I smiled faintly, tilting my head. "You look pale. Bad dream," he swallowed hard, nodding. "Yeah, bad dream." I nodded back, pretending to believe him, though inside, my heart was already miles ahead. I knew this was just the beginning. The night had only started to unfold its justice, and by morning, Daniel's world would no longer exist the way he thought it did. The morning sunlight crept through the curtains, soft and golden, brushing over Daniel's pale face. He hadn't slept a minute. Every time I stirred, he pretended to check his phone casually, but I saw the panic in his eyes. His hands trembled when he poured coffee, his thoughts spinning, desperate to understand how everything had gone wrong. I sat across from him at the table, calm, sipping slowly, watching him unravel. "Rough night?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, couldn't sleep," he muttered, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked sick, as if he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Your mom okay?" "You looked worried." He flinched slightly. "Yeah, she's fine. Just bank issues." I nodded, pretending to be sympathetic. "Strange, huh? Banks have been having a lot of fraud problems lately." His hand froze on his cup. "What do you mean?" I tilted my head. "Oh, you know, when people try to access accounts they shouldn't. The system catches it, sometimes even sends alerts to law enforcement. Crazy world, right?" His eyes flicked up to mine, studying me, searching for a clue. I just smiled sweetly and kept drinking. Inside, I could almost hear his thoughts screaming. He excused himself and rushed into the hallway, whispering on his phone. His voice was sharp, low, desperate. "Mom, what did you say to them? Why did you tell them anything? They can't prove it was me." He was pacing now, running his fingers through his hair. "No, don't cry, just stay quiet, I'll fix this." I stood by the doorway, arms crossed, watching his performance. "Fix what, Daniel?" I asked softly. He froze. His eyes widened, guilt flashing across his face before he masked it with forced calm. "It's work stuff," he said quickly. "A misunderstanding." I stepped closer, each word cutting through the lie. "Was it work when you gave my card PIN to your mother at 2 in the morning?" His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I could see his throat tightening, his pulse racing. "You were awake," he whispered finally, his voice barely audible. "I was," I said. "And I heard everything." He stared at me like a man drowning, trying to find air where there was none. "I was going to put it back," he blurted. "It was just a loan. She needed help." I laughed softly, the sound colder than I expected. "A loan, you called it? Taking everything before I wake up. That doesn't sound like a loan, does it?" He stepped closer, his voice pleading now. "Please, let me explain. You don't understand. My mom's sick, I needed to help her. You wouldn't have agreed, so you decided to steal from me," I said calmly. "From your wife." He tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. "I wasn't going to hurt you," he said. "It's just money." My eyes met his. "No, Daniel, it's trust. And you destroyed it." He slumped into the chair, covering his face with his hands. "What did you do?" he asked finally, his voice breaking. "I didn't do anything," I said quietly. "You did." I walked to the counter and picked up my phone. "Remember when I told you I was handling my company's legal funds this month? I used that same account you tried to empty. So when your mother attempted to withdraw the money, it triggered a report to the Financial Crimes Unit. Every call, every transaction, every message, it's all logged." His eyes widened in horror. No, they can't, they can," I interrupted. And they did. He grabbed his phone again, frantically dialing. "Mom, get out of there, leave the house, they'll..." His words stopped when there was a loud knock at the door. 3 sharp knocks. He turned to me, eyes wide, shaking his head in disbelief. "You called them." "I didn't have to," I said softly. "You called them when you gave her the PIN." His face drained of all color. I walked past him slowly, opened the door, and 2 officers stood there. "Mrs. Cooper?" one of them asked. I nodded. "We're here to speak with your husband regarding a financial investigation." Daniel stumbled back, stammering, "Wait, this is a mistake. I didn't steal anything." The officer stepped forward calmly. "You can explain that at the station." He looked at me one last time, his voice breaking. "Please, tell them you didn't mean it. Tell them you'll fix it." I just looked at him with quiet eyes. "You fixed everything the moment you tried to break me." They handcuffed him gently, read his rights, and led him out the door. The silence that followed was strange, empty, but peaceful. I closed the door behind them, leaned against it, and let out a slow breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My phone buzzed. A message from the bank. "Unauthorized withdrawal attempt flagged and investigated. Funds secure." I smiled faintly. I had won, not out of vengeance, but out of survival. Love had made me blind, but betrayal had given me clarity. And as I stood there in the sunlight, I realized something simple and powerful. When someone betrays you, you don't need revenge. You just need patience. Because sometimes, the truth punishes louder than anger ever could. The hours after Daniel's arrest felt strangely calm, almost unreal, as if the house itself had been waiting for this silence. I sat on the couch, the same place where we once planned our future, our dreams, our so-called perfect life. Now all that remained was the echo of his lies and the faint ticking of the clock. The police had taken his phone, but mine kept lighting up with messages from unknown numbers, his mother, his relatives, people I barely knew, all begging, demanding, accusing. How could you do this to your husband? He made a mistake, he doesn't deserve this. You ruined his life. I stared at the screen, expressionless. No one had asked how it felt to hear your husband steal from you in the dark, whispering betrayal like a lullaby. I turned off my phone. I didn't need their sympathy or their blame. I needed peace. Outside, the sun was fading behind the buildings, the sky glowing orange and gold, just like the day we moved into this house. I remembered how proud he was, telling everyone we'd built this life together. But now I understood, it was never about together. For him, it was about control, about ownership, about having access to everything I had worked for. And he would have taken it all if I hadn't stopped him. The next day, I visited the bank to finalize the fraud report. The manager recognized me instantly, his voice cautious but respectful. "Mrs. Cooper, the authorities confirmed that the withdrawal attempt was made using your card details. Fortunately, you acted quickly." I nodded, signing the last of the papers. "It wasn't quick," I said quietly. "It was careful." When I walked out of the bank, the cold air hit my face, fresh and sharp. For the first time in months, I felt free. No secrets, no lies, just me. But as I got home, something unexpected happened. A message waited in my inbox from Daniel, sent through his lawyer. Just one line: "Please see me. I need to explain." My first instinct was to delete it, but something in me wanted to see the look in his eyes when he realized what he'd lost. The next morning, I went to the detention center. The officer led me into a small gray room with a glass divider. Daniel sat on the other side, his hair messy, his face pale, his eyes hollow. When he saw me, his expression cracked, half guilt, half desperation. "You came," he said softly, like he couldn't believe it. I sat down calmly. "I did. You wanted to explain." He nodded quickly, leaning forward. "It wasn't what you think. Mom was in debt, she was being threatened. I didn't know what else to do. So you stole from me?" I asked, my voice steady. "You had a choice, Daniel. You could have asked. You would have said no," he said bitterly. "You always said I was irresponsible with money." I smiled faintly. "And you just proved me right." He sighed, lowering his head. "I didn't want to lose you. You lost me the moment you opened your mouth and gave her my PIN," I said coldly. He looked up, pain flickering across his face. "You set me up," he accused. "You wanted this to happen." "No," I said, "you set yourself up. I just made sure your betrayal wouldn't destroy me." He pressed his hands to the glass, eyes pleading. "Please, tell them I didn't mean it. They might drop the charges if you speak." I shook my head slowly. "I can't help you, Daniel. Actions have consequences. You taught me that when you chose money over loyalty." His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, he looked truly small, like a child caught in a lie he couldn't undo. "I loved you," he whispered. I stood up, gathering my bag. "You loved what I had," I said softly. "There's a difference." He called my name as I walked away, but I didn't turn back. Outside, the sun was bright, almost too bright, and I breathed in the warmth like a promise. It was over. When I returned home, the house felt empty but peaceful. I opened the closet and began packing his remaining things, his suits, his watch, his books. I placed them neatly in boxes and left them by the door. I didn't want traces of him in my space anymore. Later that evening, as I poured myself a glass of wine, I sat by the window and looked at the city lights. Somewhere, he was sitting in a cell, wondering how everything had slipped away. Maybe he was blaming me, or maybe, finally, he was blaming himself. I didn't care anymore. I thought of all the times I'd forgiven small lies, excused strange behavior, ignored red flags because I believed in love. But love without honesty is just a slow form of self-destruction. And I had finally stopped destroying myself for someone who didn't deserve it. The wind outside whispered softly, carrying away the last remnants of our past. I raised my glass slightly, as if to toast the silence. "To endings," I whispered. and new beginnings built on truth. My reflection in the window smiled back, tired, but free. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a woman who had finally remembered her worth. Weeks passed after Daniel's arrest, and life slowly began to rebuild itself around me like a house after a storm. The first few mornings felt strange without his presence, without the sound of his footsteps or the smell of his coffee, but the silence was comforting. It was a silence that no longer hid secrets. Every room in the house seemed to breathe again, lighter now that the weight of deceit was gone. People around me started to whisper, some with pity, some with judgment, but I didn't care anymore. Let them talk. I knew the truth. I knew what it took to stay calm while betrayal whispered inches from my ear. I resumed work, focused on my projects, and poured my energy into things that mattered. My company began to thrive, new clients arrived, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled because I wanted to, not because I had to. One evening, I received a call from Daniel's lawyer. His tone was cautious, respectful, but firm. "Mrs. Cooper, Daniel's hearing is tomorrow. He's asked if you'd consider attending. He says he has something to say to you." For a long moment, I said nothing. Then, quietly, I agreed. The next day, the courtroom was cold, filled with murmurs and the faint echo of shuffling papers. When they brought Daniel in, I almost didn't recognize him. His hair was shorter, his eyes dull, his shoulders slumped. He looked like a man who had finally met the mirror of his choices. When he saw me, he tried to smile, but it faded quickly. The judge spoke, the lawyers exchanged words, evidence was presented, his late-night calls, the recordings, the bank alerts. Every detail was a nail sealing the coffin of our past. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, Daniel stood up slowly, his voice trembling. "I want to apologize to my wife," he said. "Not because I want forgiveness, but because I finally understand what I lost. I thought money would fix everything, our problems, my pride, my fears. But it broke the only thing that truly mattered. I betrayed the one person who ever believed in me." The courtroom was silent. He looked at me, eyes wet, desperate for a sign of mercy. But my expression didn't change. I wasn't angry anymore, just empty of everything that used to tie me to him. The judge sentenced him to 2 years for financial misconduct and fraud conspiracy. It wasn't long, but it was enough. When they led him away, he looked back one last time, hoping for some word, some sign that I still cared. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My silence was his answer. After the hearing, I walked out into the sunlight, feeling the wind brush against my skin like freedom itself. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. That evening, I went to the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks, fierce and endless, like the rhythm of a new beginning. I sat there for hours, watching the horizon, remembering the woman I used to be, the one who doubted herself, who forgave too easily, who thought love meant losing pieces of herself to keep someone else whole. That woman was gone now. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, untouchable. My phone buzzed beside me, a message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was from his mother. "He still loves you," she wrote. I stared at the words for a moment, then deleted the message. Love without respect is poison. And I had finally learned not to drink it. The next morning, I changed everything, my locks, my number, even my name at the company. Not to hide, but to start over. The past would not define me. I sold the house that held too many memories and moved into a smaller apartment overlooking the city lights. It was quiet, but it was mine. Every corner told a story of survival, not sorrow. Sometimes at night, I still thought about that whisper in the dark, the moment that broke everything yet gave me back myself. It taught me that betrayal doesn't destroy you, it reveals who you truly are when everything safe falls apart. 1 year later, I stood on the balcony of my new place, watching the city pulse with life below. The phone rang. It was my lawyer. "Mrs. Cooper, the divorce has been finalized. Everything is settled." I closed my eyes and smiled. "Thank you," I said simply. When the call ended, I looked up at the night sky, feeling an odd mix of peace and pride. I had lost a marriage, but I had gained my freedom. And freedom, I realized, is the most expensive thing in the world, but also the most precious. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down, and opened my laptop. A new message blinked on the screen, an invitation from a charity organization asking if I'd like to mentor women recovering from financial abuse. I hesitated for a moment, then typed, "Yes." Because now, my story wasn't just mine. It was a lesson, a warning, a spark of strength for anyone who'd ever been betrayed and thought they couldn't rise again. As I hit send, I whispered to myself, some endings aren't endings at all. They're just quiet beginnings wearing the disguise of loss. The wind moved softly through the open window, carrying away the last ghost of his name. And in that stillness, I finally understood. The night he whispered my PIN to his mother, he thought he was stealing my money. But in truth, I was the one taking something back, my power, my peace, my life.